Hello, my name is Diana. I think that on some level everybody is interested in ufology, and I am not an exception. I had a lot of questions that needed an answers, so I've decided to find and speak with a ufologist. I found Guram Grdzelishvili, the most known ufologist in Georgia, took a camera and went to his house. My name is Guram Grdzelishvili. I am an ufologist. I am engaged in the study of the anomalous zones, presence of alien intelligence, and alien representatives on Earth. I've been doing this since childhood. My father, Thales Shonia, was physicist and ufologist. He founded the association Men and the Environment in 1990. The main purpose of this association is to study and popularize ufology. In 1919, the International Conference of Ufology was held in Georgia. Also, this very year, on the territory of one of the factories in Rustavi, Thales Shonia opened a ufological center. He had been working there for 2 years with his brother Georgia Shonia, a PhD in medical sciences, and several other qualified scientists. That's what is left of his ufological center in Rustavi. There was a cooperation between Earth scientists and representatives of extraterrestrial civilizations. As you can see, there is a circle in the center. It is a landing spot for the alien ships. By the aliens' request, at this very spot, they built the place of power. When a person spends some time in the circle, his or her health restores. In 1990, there was a conference which was attended by the Japanese and Georgian scientists, as well as the representatives of extraterrestrial civilizations. These pictures were taken during the conference by the 2 cameras. Here you can see white clouds. Alien beings were present in these forms. The representatives of the district committee came to evaluate our work. They didn't believe in the existence of alien civilizations. While they were checking, one of them made an attempt to enter the restaurant. The doors wouldn't open. We tried our best, but the door was somehow locked from within. And then, all of a sudden, some kind of shadow came out through the door, and the door immediately opened. Have you seen this? Yes, the shadow came out. There was a case. One girl woke up in the morning with a strange handprint on her face. "My fault, mine," she said. "What's the matter?" I asked. I didn't see that he was standing near me, so I turned sharply and his hand accidentally touched my face. How many fingers did the creature have? The creature had 3 fingers. Thales Shonia was the first ufologist in Georgia who organized the first in USSR International Conference of Ufology that was held in Tbilisi. He collaborated with American, European and Japanese scientists. Also, he was invited to the Ufological Conference in USA and collaborated with the military-industrial complex. Thales received an invitation to open an institute in Germany. He went there with his family, but didn't stay there for a long time since he was needed in Georgia. In 1992, the center was moved to Tbilisi, where Thales Shonia was working in a bomb shelter of the Georgian Academy of Sciences. The Presidium raised the issue of father's activities in the field of ufology. They've decided to give him the opportunity to work. My father received people here. Every day, 10-15 people came with their stories. Here was the office, and there were tables. My father talked with people separately, so they wouldn't communicate with each other. The reason was so they wouldn't share information. Afterwards, he checked and compared this information, and most of the time people were telling similar things. This is the room where my father received and talked to people. In the Civil War, a shooting range was set up here. You can see the bullet marks. Ever since 1970, a lot of the materials have been accumulated here, but unfortunately all have been destroyed. As you can see, everything was burned. The whole room was shut. All materials were stored in this very room. They not only shot, but also blew up grenades here. How no one died from the bullets ricochet remains unclear. There were long tables and lasers for several millions. At the same time, he worked in the holographic laboratory. He developed holograms here. There are traces of bullets everywhere. We pulled out 4 tons of shell cases from here. After everything that happened, Thales decided to take his work home and to receive people there. Thales put me in front of the contactee so that I could constantly observe the changes in the color of the aura. I had to sketch what I saw. Since I have hearing problems, I didn't hear most of the conversation. I did what was required of me. Then, after the session, Thales filled me in. There was a case when a man came with geometric-shaped burns on his body. They appeared after a contact with alien beings. The next day, there was no trace of them, and there were a lot of such cases. When contactees came to see Thales, he took them to a separate room. Communication between contactees was strictly forbidden, otherwise he no longer worked with them. The reason was to check the validity of their information. Thales conducted the conversation according to his own developed scheme, and when the answers of one contactee coincided with the information of the others, he tried to find out why the contactees gave the similar information. In this bomb shelter, Thales had a chemical laboratory, and once I saw a blue liquid there. The liquid had such a glow that I have never seen before. As Thales later explained to me, it was a fuel from a spaceship. We always went together to the UFO landing sites and anomalous zones. I saw contactees who could set walls on fire. The flame was blue, but there was no trace of the fire afterwards. There was a person who went into trance during contact and spoke on scientific topics at a very high level, although he himself didn't possess any knowledge in this field of study. Thales received a lot of letters from all over the Soviet Union, from UFO eyewitnesses. Basically, people described circular objects, increasing and decreasing in size that glowed in different colors, from bright white to dark green. Most of the UFO sightings were in crowded places. Clearly, they wanted to get in contact with humanity. This incident happened in one of the Tbilisi centers. Music school teacher Tamara Sheshilelashvili writes about it in her letter. On November 25th at about 5 p.m., my husband and I were driving to the beach, and suddenly we saw a dark object on the horizon. It hung over the TV tower. People saw how this object slowly approached. The weather was clear, there was no wind. This object changed colors. First, it was blue, then gray, and then even dark green. Traffic stopped. People were looking at this disc in amazement. The object had round windows and was completely silent. Then it slowly landed on the right side of the mountain. It was clear that it wasn't an object made on Earth, and it attracted our attention. Then it ascended, gaining altitude, and flew to the left. We followed it. We arrived at the city center and saw shocked people looking at the second flying object. Large golden ship hovered over the TV tower like a star. We stayed and watched how the right side of this object exploded. Then the ship suddenly disappeared. This is one of the thousands cases in Thales Shonia's archive. People had mass contacts, saw a Bigfoot, his footprints on the ground, were taken to another planet, had surgeries performed on them. It all started on September 9, 1989. String of nines in the date. It was about 9 or 9:15 a.m. I got into the car and drove to work by a more convenient route for me. I drove about 150 to 200 meters when I saw a woman dressed in black on the side of the road. She was dressed like a nun. I saw her waving at me to stop. I stopped the car and opened front door, thinking she would sit next to me, but she closed the door and sat in the back seat behind me. I told her that I would take you to the Grdzelishvili metro station because I had to go to work and I had no time. Also, I told her that I wouldn't take money from you. She sat quietly and didn't answer. When I started the car, she covered my eyes with her palms. I said, "What are you doing?" And at that very moment, she pressed her hands harder on my eyes. I began to resist, and when I stopped the car, she removed her hands. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I showed you respect and gave you a lift." At that moment, I understood that I saw nothing. I was blinded. I swung at her. I had the strength since I was an athlete. I didn't feel whether I hit her or not, but later I learned that I did. Then she brought something to my nose so that I would inhale it. I was totally blind and didn't see what it was, but the smell was unpleasant, like the smell of rotten eggs or rotten meat. After that, I lost consciousness and didn't remember what had happened afterwards. I didn't remember whether I had started the car or had driven somewhere. I remember absolutely nothing. But how could I start and drive the car if I had been blinded? When I woke up and looked around, I realized that I was in the forest, and I was lying on white cloth on a small field. While I was lying, I saw bushes, trees, and I understood that I regained my sight. My clothes were hanging on a bush, but I didn't see my car. Then I looked around and I couldn't believe what I saw. And I thought, what happened to me? Recently I was sitting in the car and now I'm laying in the forest. I looked around once again, but there were no trace of the woman in black. I decided to get up, but I was shaking like a child who was just learning to walk. I took my clothes, got dressed, looked around again, but didn't see anyone or anything. I didn't know where I was, in Georgia or abroad. So I slowly began to go downwards, searching for my car. Then I heard the sound of a passing car, somewhere around 50-60 meters away from me. I went down to the road and I saw a man. At that moment, I felt burning on my back, as if I had been touched by a hot skewer. I saw this man leading the cows. It turned out there was a farm nearby. I went up to him and asked him to see what was on my back. He laughed and thought that I was mocking him. I said that it burned very hard, and wouldn't he be so kind to see what was there. I lifted my shirt. He said in amazement that something was burnt on me. The burn looked like a parachute with geometric shapes depicted on a background. I asked if he had seen a blue car nearby. He said he hadn't. I went back, climbed the mountain, asked the shepherd where we were. He said that we were in Mankodi forest. Then I went back to the place where I woke up. I saw a small gorge there, and my car was packed nearby. I went to the car, got inside and tried to start it, but it wouldn't start. Then I opened the hood to fix the issue, but I couldn't detect the problem. I left the car and went down again to find someone to help. I stopped a passing car and explained my situation. The man agreed to help me, and we went back to the car. He started checking it and found foil from a pack of cigarettes on the battery terminals. I had no idea why they put it there. Maybe they didn't want me to get behind the wheel and drive, so I wouldn't get into an accident in such a poor state. I tried to drive, but I couldn't because of poor health. I was drifting to left and right. Then we decided that this taxi driver would go for help. I gave him my home address, and soon he arrived with 3 of my friends. We got into the car and they drove me home. Then I brought them up to date, and one of my friends offered me to go on television. When we got there, they listened to my story and took pictures of my bag. And as they saw that I was in poor condition, they told me to write down everything that happened to me and come in a few days for an interview. Every night, this woman appeared in my room, telling me where we will meet tomorrow. I think she was preparing me for something. One day, I was on my way to the meeting place that was in the forest. I usually use subway to get there, but as soon as I started going down to the subway, a Zhiguli, a Soviet-made car based on Italian Fiat, drove up and the driver told me to get inside. The man who was driving the car and this woman got inside and we drove towards Kaheti, it's a region in Georgia. They both had headphones in their ears, and he was switching gears without using his hands. "Where are we going?" I asked. She replied, "We will go and come back." "Okay," I said. We drove along the new road towards Gambori. As soon as we approached the turn, she gave me something to inhale, and after that I had remembered nothing. I don't know how much time has passed. I woke up inside a ship with oblong windows in the room. I was sitting in a chair in a spacesuit, and my clothes were nearby. Since I was strapped on, I couldn't move. I looked through the porthole, and since it was daytime, I could see a forest. A couple of minutes later, this woman entered the room. "Well, how are you, Guram?" she asked me. "Excellent," I said. "Where am I?" I asked. "You are in a flying saucer," she answered laughingly. She was dressed in a spacesuit just like me. Oxygen cylinders were attached to her legs. Then she went out, and the moment she closed the door, I heard the sound like 2 stones hitting each other. After that, she began to ascend, gaining altitude. I wanted to look through the window to see where we had been and how the ship would take off. But my eyes began to close and I fell asleep. I don't know how much time has passed, and I woke up as we began to land somewhere. The ship landed, I looked through the porthole and saw that there was neither forest nor water, nothing like our nature, only bare earth. I assumed it was the moon, as I learned from the books that there were no forests, grass or water on the moon. This woman comes to me and asks, "How are you?" "Get up, Guram." "Where are we?" I asked her. "None of your business," she answered me. I stepped down the ship. The staircase had only 6 steps. At the bottom there was a strange carpet. It looked as if you had taken branches and woven a carpet from them. I went down, and then we went forward for about 5-6 meters. "Can you describe the flying saucer?" "Well, there are many drawings of a similar ship. as if two plates were laid on the top of each other. It was a round green object. There were portholes around the entire radius of this ship. The room I was in was not big, 2 on 2 meters. We were walking in spacesuits on this planet. I thought it was the moon, as we knew that on the moon there was weak gravity and human weight is 6 times less, and if you jumped, you would rise higher than on Earth. I knew this from the book, and I started jumping. At my first jump, my legs leveled woman's chest. She told me, "Guram, what are you doing? You will fall." "I will not fall," I replied. I moved away from her a little and said, "Now you are in my hands. You brought me here without my permission. Now I'll have fun," I thought. I moved 20-30 meters away from the ship, and there I saw a huge crater. It was so big that I couldn't see the end of it. There was a mountain nearby. It seems that someone brought this 100-ton stone and placed it there. The ground on this planet was very dry. The color was somewhere in between gray and yellow. Since it was daytime, the sky was clear blue, though I didn't see the sun. I turned towards the ship and saw 3 tall men standing next to it, also dressed in spacesuits. Only our spacesuits were green, and theirs were light beige. I couldn't see their faces. I decided to annoy them a little and went down into the crater. I couldn't go down the crater from my side, because there was a steep descent. So I went to a gentler slope. "What are you doing, Guram? You will fall. I won't be able to get you out of there," she told me. "I will not fall. I was born and raised in the village, and I know how to climb," I answered her. I went down the slope for about 20 meters. She kept worrying and telling me, "What are you doing? Come up," in bad Georgian. Those men by the ship were also looking at me and talked among themselves. They were afraid that something would happen to me, as the crater was very deep, about 200-300 meters. I got up and started jumping again, and asked her, "Are we on the moon?" "None of your business," she replied. We were there long enough, for about 30 minutes. When I looked towards the ship, those men were no longer there. They entered the ship. We went back, I climbed the stairs and went into my room. I was seated as I was before. After that, I had fallen asleep. I didn't remember how we took off. When I woke up, the ship was already landing. I didn't know how long the flight lasted because I had been sleeping all the way back. The ship landed in the forest. When we got off the ship, she helped me to take off my spacesuit. Then I saw that a car drove up to us, and the driver told me to get into the car. He didn't ask my address, neither where I came from. He brought me straight to my house. Then I asked about payment. He looked at me and said, "Aren't you ashamed? I need nothing." He looked and spoke like an ordinary Georgian man, without any accent. It was already nighttime when I came home, and my family started to ask me where I was. Well, I joked that I was with the mistress. When the ship landed, you were already conscious. How did it land? It landed very smoothly, and I only heard a subtle sound, like when the plane stops and you hear the sound from the turbines. Something similar to this sound, only very quiet. Can you describe the cabin you were in? Yes, of course. There were white walls, so white that they were glowing. There was no light source. It felt like light was coming from the walls. There was only the armchair on which I sat. It was white and leather. The door to my cabin had a very neat handle. it didn't take much effort to open the door. After that, we met many more times, and I visited another planet. These are the traces from the performed surgeries. They were performed during our meetings in the forest. I don't remember the process because I was unconscious. I had 6 surgeries on my back. Also, he had heart and arm surgeries performed on him. The traces disappeared in 2-3 days. Guram met with these beings for a fairly long period of time. It began in 1989 and ended in 1991. By 1996, 21 civilizations were registered in Tbilisi with their own written language. The number continues to grow. When big changes begin, abnormal phenomena often become quite active in the same places. Kvemokartli, some districts of Tbilisi. This is all related to geology and the excitation of the biosphere. We examined the landing sites, meticulously investigated their radiation. We went through this in 80s, and now we communicate more closely with people who have direct contact with extraterrestrial civilizations. This is why our organization is called Human and the Environment. Extraterrestrial beings come here because of the importance of human factor. There are a lot of distortions in the process of receiving information. These distortions come from our fantasy, from the logic by which we are trying to explore the world. But this logic depends on how receptive we are. The spectrum that we see is very small indeed, and with this we are trying to perceive the world. Sometimes it is worthwhile to turn off the logic in order to receive information directly. We need to grow spiritually and technically, and this development must be balanced. Our planet has a special place in the cosmos. With the invention of atomic weapons, we should have the ability to deal with the consequences. All worlds in the universe are connected to each other. By destroying ourselves, we can damage many other worlds with a chain reaction. The whole universe, therefore, controls, teaches, and helps us. The fact that Earth is teeming with a variety of life makes it appear odd to ask whether there could be other planets in the universe which could be inhabited by intelligent life. Only in our galaxy, Milky Way, there is more than 200 billion stars like our Sun. We need to open our minds to see how beautiful and diverse is the world we live in. There are 100 billion other galaxies, each and which contains 100 billion stars. Think of how many stars and planets and kinds of life there may be in this endless and beautiful universe.